The 2025 motorcycle market didn't just dip, it collapsed. And it's hitting harder than anyone expected. Because while the world was still talking about supply chain shortages, dealers were already drowning in 280 plus days of unsold inventory. And now, brands are stuck with billions in metal they literally can't move. What I'm about to show you proves this collapse is even worse than you think. Here's what nobody saw coming. Inventories are stacking up at catastrophic levels, while dealers slash prices desperately trying to move metal that just sits there collecting dust. Brands overproduced during the pandemic recovery, betting on continued growth that never materialized, and now they're stuck with warehouses full of bikes nobody wants. The math is simple. When you produce 23% more bikes than market demand, you create a supply glut that destroys everyone's profitability. Dealers are offering zero-down financing, extended warranties, and cash rebates that would have seemed impossible just 2 years ago. But guess what? Even with these desperate incentives, the bikes aren't moving. How do you think that's working out for dealer cash flow when they're paying interest on every unsold unit? Now here's where the real panic sets in. Dealers are in full crisis mode as floor plan loans bleed money while inventory sits stagnant. These loans charge interest on every bike sitting on the lot, and when inventory doesn't turn for months, those costs multiply exponentially. Dealers are hemorrhaging cash on bikes they can't sell while banks demand their monthly payments regardless. Trade-ins are getting rejected faster than bad credit applications because dealers already have too much used inventory they can't process. The used market is crashing simultaneously, creating a double hit that's devastating dealer operations. Small dealers are shutting down quietly rather than face bankruptcy, liquidating whatever they can and walking away from the industry entirely. Want to know how many powersports dealers closed permanently in your state this year? But here's the killer blow that's destroying the entire market. Financing has become toxic for consumers, with loan rates hitting 10 to 15% that transform a $25,000 bike into a $40,000 total cost nightmare. When you're looking at monthly payments exceeding $500 before insurance, most potential buyers simply walk away. The math doesn't work for regular people anymore. Rejection rates have skyrocketed, with roughly 1 in 5 applicants getting denied outright, even with decent credit scores. Banks have tightened lending criteria so aggressively that motorcycle loans now require the same qualifications as luxury car financing. Insurance costs have doubled in many states, adding another $200 to $400 monthly expense that catches buyers completely off guard. Who can afford $700 plus monthly just to own a motorcycle? Want to see how desperate things have become? Repossessions are up 28%, the highest levels since the 2008 financial crisis. Lenders are seizing bikes faster than dealers can process and resell them, creating yet another inventory glut that crashes values even further. The repo cycle is vicious and accelerating. Riders are trapped in upside-down loans where they owe significantly more than their bike is worth in today's crashed market. I've seen cases where someone owes $15,000 on a bike worth $8,000. That's financial devastation that destroys people's willingness to finance another motorcycle ever again. What happens to an industry when an entire generation of customers gets burned this badly? Meanwhile, the used market is experiencing its own spectacular meltdown that's making everything worse. Trade-in values have crashed 35% across most categories, wiping out equity that riders were counting on for upgrades. That Harley you paid $28,000 for in 2022? It's worth maybe $16,000 in trade today, if a dealer will even accept it. The flood of used bikes is creating impossible competition for new motorcycle sales. Why would anyone pay $15,000 for a new entry-level bike when they can get a barely used premium model for the same price? Most riders now have zero equity left in their current bikes, making upgrades financially impossible. The traditional motorcycle buying cycle where riders trade up every few years has completely broken down. How does an industry survive when its core upgrade culture disappears? Here's the reality check that's killing sales. The price bubble has finally burst, and buyers are refusing to accept the premium pricing that manufacturers got addicted to during the shortage years. We're talking about 40% plus price increases since 2020 that have priced out entire demographics. Entry-level Harleys that used to cost $8,000 now start at $15,000 plus. Buyers are saying enough and walking away rather than pay what they consider insulting prices for marginal improvements. The disconnect between what manufacturers want to charge and what consumers will pay has created massive demand destruction. People aren't just delaying purchases, they're abandoning motorcycling entirely rather than pay these inflated prices. Think that's sustainable for long-term industry health? But here's the industry's most expensive failure: the electric motorcycle fantasy that burned billions in investment for products nobody actually wants. Livewire, Zero, and Energica represent overpriced, underperforming machines with range anxiety, sky-high costs, and virtually zero market adoption. The promised revolution turned into an expensive joke. Harley's Livewire division is the poster child for this disaster. They're sitting on inventory that would take over 280 days to sell at current demand levels. Zero laid off a third of their workforce, and Energica filed for restructuring. Range anxiety remains insurmountable. Charging infrastructure is a joke outside major cities, and these bikes eliminate everything that makes motorcycling emotionally appealing. What's the point of a silent motorcycle that can't go anywhere? CTA. Look, if you're seeing the same warning signs I am and want to stay ahead of which brands might not survive this collapse, hitting that subscribe button makes sense since I track these industry meltdowns months before mainstream media catches on. The carnage is just getting started. Want to know which specific brands are failing most spectacularly? Whether it's Harley, Honda, or your Yamaha, each brand is facing a hard time with unsold inventory. Indian's Challenger series massively overestimated demand, and dealers are stuck with sport touring bikes that appeal to maybe a few hundred buyers nationwide. BMW's CE04 electric scooter, Ducati's V2 lineup, and Triumph's Rocket 3 represent the same fundamental problem: manufacturers chasing niche markets with premium pricing while ignoring their core customer base. These bikes are too expensive, too specialized, and targeted at segments that were never as large as marketing departments pretended they were. Even traditionally bulletproof brands like Honda and Yamaha are struggling with specific models that seemed like surefire hits on paper, but flopped in reality. The adventure bike segment, once considered immune to downturns, is showing cracks as buyers realize most adventure riders never leave pavement and don't need $20,000 machines for weekend rides. How did manufacturers get so disconnected from actual rider behavior? So, what happens next? The forecast is brutal, and I don't think most people are prepared for how bad this gets. Factory layoffs have already started, with more announcements coming as manufacturers scale back production to match actual demand instead of wishful thinking. Some plants will shut down entirely, and certain model lines will disappear forever as companies retreat to their core profitable segments. Dealership consolidation will accelerate dramatically. Expect 20 to 30% of current dealers to close within the next 2 years. Survivors will be larger operations with deeper pockets, while local family-owned dealers get wiped out completely. Entire regions might end up with one dealer covering areas that previously had 5 or 6. Parts and service will become more expensive as the dealer network shrinks, making motorcycle ownership costlier even for people who already own bikes. Several brands won't survive this downturn in their current form. Either they'll get acquired by competitors, go full budget to compete on price alone, or exit entire segments they can't make profitable anymore. The industry that emerges will be smaller, more consolidated, and focused on fewer, more affordable models. Will that be enough to save what's left? Here's what really happened. This collapse was entirely predictable if you were paying attention, but the industry ignored every warning sign because profits were too good during the artificial shortage period. Manufacturers got greedy, dealers got complacent, and financiers got reckless. Now everyone's paying the price except the executives who engineered this disaster. The saddest part? This didn't have to happen. Reasonable pricing, sustainable production levels, and focusing on core customers instead of chasing fantasy segments could have prevented most of this damage. Instead, we got an industry that prioritized short-term profits over long-term sustainability and believed its own marketing hype instead of market reality. Young riders are being priced out entirely, creating a demographic time bomb as the current rider base ages out without replacement. The industry spent so much time chasing premium customers that they forgot motorcycling's roots as affordable transportation and accessible recreation. What happens to motorcycle culture when only wealthy people can participate? The bottom line is simple. The 2025 motorcycle market collapse represents everything wrong with modern corporate thinking. Recovery will take years, not months, and the industry that eventually emerges will look nothing like what we had before. Fewer choices, higher costs, limited dealer networks, and a customer base that's been burned badly enough to approach future purchases with extreme caution. The manufacturers and dealers who survive will be those who recognize that motorcycles need to be accessible, affordable, and genuinely appealing to regular people, not just affluent enthusiasts willing to pay any price. Until that fundamental shift happens, expect more bad news, more closures, and more disappointed riders walking away from the sport entirely. This isn't just a market correction, it's the end of motorcycling as we've known it for decades. The revolution isn't coming, it's already over. Subscribe our channel to stay updated with crashing motorcycle industry.